Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. In any complex human activity, there is always an endgame. Some people have the endgame in mind before they start looking. Others have no idea how the project or venture will end, and just deal with whatever comes up. The main suggestion is this. Do you plan to evaluate the possible results of your efforts in advance and develop an endgame? Or are you just going with the flow and hoping that the result will be what you would like it to be? I, Vivian Peters, am in charge of planning. In my experience, the problem with a spontaneous strategy is that it rarely leads to the most desired outcome. That's why I almost always mean the end result, how the endgame will play out. I'm not going to bore you with my personal life before marriage, or describe what Vivian and my husband Ralph look like. You can think of me as an Amazon, with the attractiveness of Emily Ratajkowski or the repulsive Roseanne Barr, with a six-pack or a bag. None of this has anything to do with the case, because people of all shapes, sizes, and attractiveness are either planning their endgame or going with the flow. Ralph and I really believe in love. The problem I had was to define exactly what it means to be in love. I liked Ralph's company. We liked going together or in a group to concerts, plays, and hockey games, or just watching TV, sitting next to each other on the couch. We treated each other well. We were neither a fool nor a bastard. We often made love, but we didn't have children. We planned to eventually have children, but it wasn't soon enough when Ralph and I, both 28, had been married for 7 years. 7 years is an approximate time when the notorious itch allegedly begins. And then it dawned on me. It's not that my life was bad, it just became too predictable. It wasn't as exciting as it used to be. I've always had a higher libido than most of my girlfriends, and I wondered what I could do about my current lack of arousal. Being a logical thinker, I first explored how to spice up my life with Ralph. However, Ralph didn't seem to have any interest in role-playing games, underwear, whipped cream, or other supposedly classic ways to spice up the bedroom experience. For about 9 months, I unsuccessfully tried to spice myself up. It was then that I made the conscious decision to have an affair. Since it was a conscious decision, I looked at it analytically, as I have looked at everything else in my life since my early teens. I had the following goals. 1. The partner I was attracted to, the most obvious goal. 2. A partner who had as much to lose as I did, probably meaning that he was married to someone he loved. 3. A partner who won't fall in love with me. 4. A partner and a situation in which I could end the affair without complications within 10 to 16 months. Since after that time I was interested in having children with Ralph. 5. A partner who, as I knew, did not have an STD, since condoms would partially blunt my pleasure. 6. A partner who was not friends with Ralph and whose wife I was not friends with. 7. A partner who has been secretive in the past. 8. A partner who had a fairly flexible schedule, so that the rendezvous could sometimes be spontaneous and who did not have to count the last penny. After compiling this list, on my password-protected and biometrically protected computer, I realized that it was a difficult task. Fortunately, Ralph and I have a lot of activities. We are members of various public organizations and belong to various national health clubs, each of which has several branches in our metropolitan area. I've seen a lot of interesting guys in each of these situations and places, but I haven't looked before. I didn't know much about them. I made a list of 10 guys I'd dated or at least noticed before, most of whom I only knew by name or didn't even know by name, and had to describe them in other ways, such as the guy in short shorts at Planet Fitness on Elm, or Jim Preston's partner in tennis at the club. Working on a social network, keeping my eyes and ears open, searching the internet, and even sometimes pretending to be an employee of the Department of Health, over the next few weeks after compiling a list of goals and a list of known opportunities, I understood well what I needed to do. Fortunately, my work schedule provides maximum flexibility. As long as I do my job, I can work anytime and anywhere, although I have a real office in the city center. That's why I had a lot of opportunities to chat with the 10 guys I had outlined. It was quite slow, but enjoyable, interacting and flirting with potential targets. After hours of talking at various points in time with potential targets, I dismissed 6 as unsuitable for one reason or another. I had no chemistry with 2, and I had an awkward conversation with one guy, whom I'll call Walt. Walt had just come to the pool of our country club after playing golf. Dressed in a bikini, I approached him and asked if the seat next to him was occupied or reserved. "Absolutely not reserved, Vivian." "Have a seat," he smiled. "How's the golf today, Walt?" "How do you know I'm playing?" "I saw you walking to the locker room just before I decided to go to the pool." "So you've been spying on me," he chuckled. "And if it were, would it bother you?" I asked, taking off my sunglasses and staring at him intently. "No, but why?" He chuckled. "Maybe I think you're handsome. Isn't that too straightforward?" I replied with an evil grin. "Don't tell my wife, Mabel, that. She's jealous," he chuckled. "Are you too afraid of her to flirt or maybe even go a few steps further with me?" I replied in my most passionate voice and ran the nail of my index finger over his hand. "I'm not afraid, it's just not in my nature. I'm a seriously monogamous guy," he replied firmly. Then, after a pause, he continued as it seemed to me in a joking manner. "Are you going to lie around the pool all day trying to pick up guys, or are you going to swim?" "I need to go for a swim." With that, he jumped off the chaise longue and dived into the pool. Adding insult to injury, he sprayed me. It was such a blow to my ego that I almost abandoned my plan to have an affair right here and now, especially since there was only one guy left on my list. I put on a cape and, rethinking the situation, left the pool and headed for the club. My chagrin was so great that I didn't pay enough attention to where I was going. As I turned the corner, I bumped into Jim Preston and his tennis partner. I was almost knocked down, but my tennis partner picked me up. The three of us exchanged apologies, and as soon as it became clear that everything was fine, Jim said, "Vivian, I do not know if you have ever been introduced to my tennis partner, Jared White. Jared, meet Vivian Peters, my old friend." Jim's tennis partner was the only one on my list I hadn't talked to yet, because he wasn't a member of the club and only occasionally came with Jim to play at the club. I just didn't have a chance to meet him. I thought it was a good sign that I literally ran into him right after my most humiliating experience. The three of us chatted for a while, and then Jared said, "Jim and I were going to change our clothes and then go to the bar." "If I don't impose," I smiled. "No, please," Jim replied. "Meet me at the club bar in 15 minutes. "I will," I smiled. "And thank you for inviting me," I continued, running my hand over Jared's arm. As I glided away, I got the distinct impression that Jared and maybe Jim too were watching my ass. I didn't turn around and make sure of it, but I had already felt the stares on my ass before, so I decided that this was another good sign. I had a great time at the bar talking to Jim and Jared. Without being too obvious to Jim, I did all the vampire things to attract Jared that my older sister taught me. These included gazing into Jared's eyes as he spoke, occasionally tossing my hair over my shoulder with a turn of my head, inadvertently bumping into or touching him, and moving my lips in a sensual manner when I was eating or drinking, when making eye contact. Jim, unintentionally, I'm sure, since he was friends with Ralph, gave me some time alone with Jared, sneaking out after about 20 minutes because he had to meet his wife for bridge. I offered to sign the check. He objected, but I persuaded him. After Jim left, I started flirting even more, and I could tell that Jared was interested. We talked for a total of about an hour before we both had to leave. During this time, I compared Jared to my list of novels/endgames. He met all the criteria that could be determined at the first meeting, namely, I was definitely attracted to him. In fact, he was the most handsome of the 10 original candidates I listed. He was married and said only good things about his wife. He showed me a photo and she was very pretty, except that she traveled on business more than he would have liked. His highly paid job required security clearance, and he was proud of his ability to keep a secret. He had never met or even seen Ralph, and his work schedule was almost as flexible as mine. When we broke up, we really hugged, and I could tell there was some activity in his crotch. He said, "Maybe we can have lunch together sometime," I replied quickly. "How about Wednesday afternoon at Non Solo Pasta on the corner of Elm and 23rd, which is close to both our offices?" Jared smiled broadly. "See you then." I was working from home on Wednesday morning, so I dressed much more provocatively for lunch than if I were going to the office. I chose a lipstick. Jared looked great when he arrived. We hugged, greeting each other. I booked a table and knew the manager, so we took a table a little isolated from the general noise. I got the distinct impression from Jared's body language that he was as interested as I was, that we both just needed to see if our desires matched. After a very flirtatious, funny, and intriguing lunch, I decided that being bold was the right approach. After I insisted that we split the check, I said, Do you have time to go to the local park for a conversation that I don't want to have in a restaurant? Can we meet at Grant Park in an hour? Jared asked. I have one problem that I have to solve at work. No problem, I replied. We hugged goodbye. I drove to Grant Park, found a good parking spot, and worked on the computer until I saw Jared get out of the car. Hand in hand, Jared and I walked to a remote, isolated corner of the park and sat down on a bench. I got right to the point. If you're not interested during my monologue, stop me and we'll part as friends, I said pointedly. All right, he replied with a pale smile. I'm attracted to you, Jared. I would like to continue, but only on certain conditions. I was waiting for objections, but they did not come. At the end of this time, I want to take a break. I'm not going to fall in love with you, and I don't want you to fall in love with me. It's just the cherry on top of the ice cream of my life. Your reaction? Jared looked at me for what seemed like a very long time. Then he moved closer to me, gently pulled my head to him and imprinted a truly passionate kiss on my lips. The kiss lasted a long time, and I responded in kind. When we finally parted with a smile, he said, I needed to evaluate the compatibility. I liked. Now that we have this preliminary test, I suggest STD tests as the next step, I replied brazenly. And after that, how will we communicate? He asked. Drafts of letters, I replied quickly. When I saw the uncomprehending look, I said, I'll teach you. Now about the STD tests. When we returned to the parking lot, I showed him a new password-protected email account that I had created using a computer in a library, remote from my home and office. You're making a draft email in this account, but you're not sending it, I instructed, giving him the password. I'll leave you a draft of the letter after I come back with the STD test. You log into your account after a few days, check the drafts folder and write your message. I'll access it later and look through the drafts folder. We never, ever send an email from this address. We only leave drafts of messages and never use a name or any identifying information in the drafts of emails. He smiled and kissed me again. It was nice. On Thursday, we went to different labs to get tested for STDs. I wrote a draft letter in our secret account saying that my results would be back on Tuesday morning. I posted my all-clear results in the draft email folder on Tuesday around 11 a.m., and he posted his all-clear at about 2:30 p.m. At about 3:30, I deleted his message and asked, Thursday noon, Hilton Suite on Highway 50? Around 4 o'clock, he deleted my post and wrote, On board, with a smiley face. I expected to be nervous when I showed up at the Hilton Suites on Thursday at 11:58 a.m., but for some reason I wasn't nervous. I just felt excited. When Jared saw my car, he walked up to the driver's seat, handed me the keycard without any expression on his face, and said, Number 1210, and then went to the other end of the building. I went to the restaurant and checked everything around to make sure that there was no one I knew there and that no one was following me. Then I took the elevator up to 1210. Jared showed up a few minutes later. I was really looking forward to it, he chuckled. Me too. There's no reason to waste time, is there? I asked rhetorically. Jared's eyes got as big as baseballs when my panties fell to the floor, and even though he was wearing more clothes than me, he quickly undressed while looking at me. We didn't kiss for long. After a significant jolt ran through our nerve endings, Jared moved away and lay down next to me. Wow, he chuckled. Right at you, I giggled. Have you been in heat? He laughed. Maybe, I replied. I do not know exactly what came over me, but I definitely did not control the situation. We talked for a long time. We chatted a little more, and then I got up. It's time to work today, I laughed. But not before the shower, huh? He asked. Okay, as long as we use my soap, I replied, pulling a plastic bag with a half-used bar of soap out of my purse. We had a good shower. I got dressed before Jared. I had fewer clothes. I gave Jared a quick kiss before I left. Be sure to wait 10 minutes before you go out. I smiled. And tomorrow I will write a draft letter about the next meeting. I can't wait, he replied. It was exactly what I was looking for, since the project I had to work on could be done from home. I went straight home, put my panties and bra in the washing machine along with other clothes and turned them on just in case there were any traces left on them. I put the dress in a cleaning bag and then rinsed it off twice. I was able to focus enough to do my project. As soon as I was done, I started dinner, and my thoughts fluctuated between my pleasant afternoon enjoyment and how excited I was to use Ralph tonight. Poor Ralph didn't stand a chance if he wanted to have a good night. After a light dinner, I suggested playing a board game. To make it more interesting, I grinned, biting my thumb. Let's decide that tonight the winner will do whatever he wants with the loser. Agreed. He laughed as we shook hands. I lost on purpose. Ralph surprised the hell out of me when he said he wanted to tie my hands to the headboard, blindfold me. The next morning, Ralph and I were in a good mood. We had a passionate kiss goodbye, and I had a great day at work. I didn't even think about my adultery until after lunch, when I suddenly realized that I had to make a draft letter for Jared about our next meeting. I checked my calendar and then drafted the letter, next Wednesday morning or after 2 p.m. Before I left the office, I checked my email. Wednesday, 10 a.m., Best Western on the Grove? I answered quickly. I'll be there, with a smile emoji. Hello, Goddess Vivian, I'm home. Ralph grinned as he left the garage. What the hell? He blurted out. I guess he wanted to know what we were going to eat that evening, but his eyes saw me before he finished the sentence. In a hoarse voice, I replied, You're going to eat at the U restaurant, and then I'm going to eat salami. Ralph didn't need to hear any more. As soon as we both came to our senses, I cooked him a decent dinner, only in an apron and high heels. He seemed to enjoy the food and the view. Jared seemed to really like playing games. One of our favorites was that I would dress provocatively, put on a wig and makeup, and then knock on the door of his hotel room. Hi, Sport, I'm Mindy from the Great Expectations Escort Service, I said, pretending to chew gum. Come in, Mindy, Jared replied with a grin. After that, we agreed on the price, on what I can do for him, and he begged me not to use a condom. Ultimately, I reluctantly agreed to the lack of a condom, because you're such a stud and I believe you're clean. Then he handed me $1,000 in Monopoly money, which I stuffed into my bra. When we made love, we said dirty things, noting what a wonderful call girl I was and what a horny John he was. Other times, I pretended to be a maid and I needed to clean the room. He proposed to me, I resisted, and then he took me by force. Over the next few months, I patted myself on the back about how well my plan was progressing. I think it could be due to the natural production of pheromones by my body, subconsciously seducing Ralph. Around the 5th month of my program, I first noticed subtle changes in Jared. He extended our sessions whenever he had the opportunity, not trying to make love again, but hugging or talking. He also kept pestering me to actually have a relationship with him. Whenever we met, he offered to have lunch, take a walk in the park, go to the zoo, or do other harmless things. Several times he even suggested that we spend a long weekend together. At first, I didn't think too much about it. At first, I thought he was joking, and I grinned. Of course it will really work. But when I looked at his face, I realized that he was serious. And why not? We are really compatible. Bells rang in my head. Whoa, 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 flashed through my head. We don't have to make love. We're just making love, I said to myself. Instead of putting into words what I was thinking, I tried to soften it. Jared, remember our agreement before we started this business? Not to fall in love. If we were together all the time, you wouldn't like me so much. Making love for 2 to 3 hours once a week does not really reflect a relationship outside of a hotel room. You'd get tired of me quickly. Jared didn't buy it. He tried to convince me that we had love, not just compatibility. Look, Jared, I love my husband. What I feel for him is very different from what I feel for you. You're a great guy, so maybe if we had met when we were both single, we could have been together. But that's not the situation. I don't want to leave my husband, and you shouldn't want to leave your beautiful wife. Jared didn't like it, but he seemed to accept it. I decided that now is the time to put all the cards on the table. My relationship with Ralph was better than ever. We are approaching the final. Most likely, when 10 or 11 months have passed, I will give up everything. You're really good, but by then I'll be ready to have children with my husband. I could tell from his initial expression that Jared was crushed. A messy breakup wasn't part of my endgame. I was expecting an easy, clean break, especially because I thought he looked better than me. However, he seemed to come to his senses and said, I understand, Vivian. It's just that you're so funny that I wish we could go on forever. But I agreed to 10 to 16 months, and I'm a man of my word. When he said that, I smiled broadly and said, Thank you for understanding. This seemed to improve his mood, and although he was a little rude at heart, he did ring my bells from behind. It was a bright sunny day when I left the obstetrician-gynecologist's office. She decided that I was in excellent health, and we discussed my plan for having children. I've already made it clear to Jared that our date the next day will be the last. By the weekend, I intended to throw away the birth control pills. I called Ralph on his cell phone, but he switched to voicemail. It seemed strange to me because he was waiting for my call after a visit to the doctor to get permission to have a baby. I left him a short, cheerful message saying that I was going to get pregnant this weekend, with the idea of calling him later that day. My second call to Ralph never took place. I was sitting at my desk in my office when I got a call from Lenox Hospital asking me to go there immediately. Ralph had an accident. By the time I desperately got to the hospital, nearly crashing my car several times on the way, it was already too late. Ralph was dead. Crossing the road near his office, he was hit by a driver. I was devastated. I had to be sedated. And that night, I was admitted to the hospital for observation. I was in a trance for the next week before Ralph's funeral. Fortunately, my older sister and Ralph's younger sister were able to spend some time with me and take over most of the preparations for his memorial service. It wasn't until after Ralph's funeral that I checked my secret email. Not that I had any interest in meeting Jared, just to let him know that we wouldn't meet again. There were several messages from him in the draft folder, in which he wondered why he had imagined me. I replied briefly that Ralph had been murdered and that I would not be able to talk to him for the foreseeable future. The next day, he sent me a draft reply expressing his understanding and wishing me all the best, but promising to keep in touch in case I wanted to talk. A police investigation was conducted into the accident that killed Ralph, but authorities had no real leads before his funeral. 10 days after the funeral, a local detective asked me to come to the station to talk. When I got there about an hour later, Detective Burns, a 30-something woman who looked like Gina Carano, asked me to watch some video. Vivian, we searched for some clues for quite some time during our initial investigation into your husband's death, but only yesterday we received video from 2 different surveillance cameras that we didn't know about before. One video was captured by a camera a block before, and the other one was shot a block after your husband was hit. We'd like you to look at them to see if there's anything you learn that might help, Burns said. I'll try, I replied. Before you look at them, let me say that we think they show the car that hit your husband, but the license plate on it was stolen in the southern suburbs a few days before the hit and run, so it doesn't really help, Burns continued. When Burns scrolled through the video, I tried my best not to react. Fortunately, the room was darkened to see the video better, so my reaction was not very noticeable. It was a Chevrolet Malibu, a popular car that had not undergone significant changes in its style for many years, the same car model as Jared's. The fleeting image of the driver in the second video was unclear, but he did look like Jared in sunglasses. The sunglasses were different from the others. I had never seen them on Jared before. The car in the video had unique racing stripes. Jared's car also had racing stripes, but they were very different. However, I remember one day when Jared and I first met, he told me that his car's racing lanes were removable and that he loved working on his car himself. Many thoughts were raging in my brain when I asked for the video to be played several times. Most of my thoughts were scary. After about the 10th time, I told Detective Burns that I had seen enough. My eyes watered when the lights came back on. Burns apologized for making me go through this ordeal, although fortunately the video did not show Ralph being hit. I said to Burns, I'm sorry to be emotional, but the idea that it could be the car that hit Ralph is very embarrassing. Unfortunately, I didn't find out anything. I'm sorry. I didn't expect it because we think the hit and run was accidental, but we need to explore all possibilities, she replied. Thank you for your hard work, Detective, and let me know if there's anything else I can do, I said. Then, as if it was an afterthought, I asked, I doubt that this will be useful, but could you print out the best frame from the second video for me in case something appears in my memory later? Of course, she replied, picking up the phone in the conference room. Let me call a specialist. 5 minutes later, I had a photo of a better view of the car and the driver, which clearly showed the exact configuration of the racing lanes, damage to the headlights on the passenger side and the characteristic sunglasses. I had to drive straight home from the police station and collect my thoughts. After sitting in my living room staring blankly at my favorite painting on the largest wall for 90 minutes, I came to a conclusion about what to do. I jumped up and checked my secret email. There was a spam email. They even reach random secret and rarely used accounts, and something in the drafts folder from Jared that was placed there last week. The draft of Jared's letter said, Is there a time when you would like to meet and talk? I replied, Give me about 2 weeks. Check regularly and I'll let you know. Although I had never been to Jared's house, I knew where he was. It was located in a cul-de-sac in the southern suburbs of our metropolis, 3 miles from where the license plates for the alleged hit-and-run were stolen. In the middle of the night, dressed in dark clothes, I went to Jared's house. I was lucky. His Chevrolet Malibu was parked on the street, not in the garage. I examined him carefully. Although I'm not an expert, I didn't need to be an expert to notice that the racing lanes were different than I'd ever seen before, and that in one place where there was a wide red stripe in the photo of the suspect car, there seemed to be a residue of glue. In addition, it was clear that the headlight and the chrome mounting bracket on the passenger side were new, and although the paint on the headlight body was exactly the same color as the rest of the car, it had more gloss than the surrounding areas. I had to do something. A few days after my overnight trip, I wrote a draft letter to my secret account, asking Jared if he could meet me at a Motel 6 in the northern suburbs at noon next Friday. He quickly confirmed it. I was nervous when I met Jared because my main goal was to find out if there was anything that could confirm my suspicions that he killed Ralph. I knew I would have to use it, but I needed to make sure before I took the next step. I must be a great actress because he was so affectionate and didn't suspect anything. At first I used it, thinking of myself as a black widow spider that devours its mate. Although it took a while, he still opened up. He started asking if we could have a future together so that something good could come out of the tragedy with Ralph. I objected, telling him that it was too early to talk about it, but we can hope for the future. During our conversation in bed, I specifically asked him if he knew anyone who even suspected that we were close, and he strongly denied that he had told anyone, and was sure, especially considering our precautions, that no one knew anything. What about Jim? I've only seen him 3 or 4 times since we've been making love, and I've never even mentioned you, and neither has he. So that Jared wouldn't suspect anything, I went with him to a late lunch. Jared and I went to lunch at his Malibu. During the trip, I took a pair of distinctive sunglasses from his remote control and said, "I like these sunglasses, Jared. I hope you don't mind if I take a picture of them." I didn't wait for an answer, but he casually said, "Of course," after I took a picture with my iPhone. I wonder if they have any with blue lenses. I smiled before handing them back. When I got home, I played the recording of our conversation on my iPhone several times. Using a magnifying glass, I also compared the photo I took of his sunglasses with the glasses in the detective's photo. I convinced myself that I had enough evidence from examining Jared's car, his conversations with me before and after Ralph's murder, his motive, and comparing his sunglasses with the driver's glasses in the photo that Jared was the killer. Later that week, I went to a gun show in a neighboring state, where gun laws are weak, where they don't ask questions and don't give answers, to buy a Glock G 4422 CR handgun. The guy who sold it to me from his trunk carefully explained everything about his work. As soon as I bought it and 20 rounds, 2 magazines of .22 caliber, I took the Glock to the shooting range and shot 15 rounds. It was enough to introduce me to the operation of the gun, how it feels when fired, how loud the sound was, etc. 2 days later, I wrote another draft of the text on my secret email address. I arranged to meet Jared at the same Motel 6 as before, the one that was so far away, and told him to get the most remote room. After changing, I took a taxi to a truck stop about a mile from the motel and headed there on foot, carrying a bag with a change of clothes and other disguise in my hand. Jared opened the door with a big smile when he noticed my disguise, and I acted like a fake call girl when I said, "Don't touch it, John, until you pay," pretending to chew gum. He escorted me to the motel room without touching me. When I entered, I took a pillow from the bed, took a Glock out of my purse, and using the pillow as a fairly effective silencer, put 4 bullets in his chest. While he was lying bleeding, I stood over him, pointed the gun at his forehead, and fired the last bullet into his brain. After waiting 5 minutes next to his dead body to make sure no one would react to the muffled shots, I put all 5 shell casings in my purse pocket. I didn't think there would be any reaction, since it was the middle of the day when there were no other guests nearby, and in fact there was no reaction. After putting on gloves and changing clothes, I fished his car keys out of his pocket, drove his car to a bad part of the city but closer to the Flea Hotel, and left it on the street with the keys. I wiped all the parts of the Glock with alcohol wipes and left the gun on the floor near the back passenger seat. On the way to the hotel, I threw 5 spent shell casings into the sewer. At the hotel, I took a taxi, which dropped me off at a shopping mall 2 kilometers from my house. I threw both masks in a dumpster at the mall and went home. When I got home, I deleted all the remnants of my secret email account, including from my hard drive. Until now, a year after I killed Jared, the cops hadn't contacted me. I also don't expect to be contacted in the future, because as far as I know, no one except Jim even knows that I know Jared, and no physical evidence connects me to him. Jim, of course, didn't suspect anything when, a week after Jared's body was found, he said to me, "Do you remember my tennis partner, Jared?" After a pause, I said, "Yes, do I remember how he is?" "He was killed." I feigned shock and even let out a crocodile tear. Did I feel bad about shooting Jared? Hell no. Do I feel overwhelmingly guilty for having an affair with my husband's killer? Yes. I continue to feel overwhelming guilt and will probably never be able to get rid of it. Am I upset, annoyed, and angry at myself for how far from the planned ending everything turned out? For how catastrophically my novel ended? You bet. No words can express my dejection or the degree of self-loathing. What should I do about it? Other than the fact that I work 20 hours a week at a women's shelter and donate all the insurance money from Ralph's death to worthy causes, I have no idea. I no longer have confidence in developing an effective endgame.